Well, I'm super excited about kicking off this brand new series, Let's Go. And over the next 5 weeks, we're going to engage in this conversation. And this is where I want to start. You have a story. I have a story. And maybe you've never thought about this before, but you have a story, a book filled with pages. Some have words on it. Some are blank to be filled out. Maybe you're at more the beginning of your story. You're thinking about your dreams, what you want to become, what you want to do in life. Maybe you're thinking about college, or maybe you're in college. Maybe you took a step out of college. Maybe you're newly married. Maybe you've been married for a few years. Maybe you're starting a family. You have one child, or maybe you have the second one on the way. But as you think about your story, you have more blank pages in front of you than you have filled out. And maybe for you, you're more towards the end of your story. You have more pages filled in than you have blank in front of you. I'm 52, and it's an interesting season of life where I want time to slow down, and the more I want it to slow down, the quicker it goes. I stare at young couples who are having their first child or maybe their second child, and I'm looking at them, and it's like a blink for me as I stare at my grown young adult daughters. I'm like, where has time gone? I think about the pages in my story, in my book, and I realize I don't have many blank pages left. But here's what I know about your story. Even if we've never met before, because your story is like my story. All of our stories they're all filled with unexpected twists. You know those moments that you just don't see coming? Our stories are filled with sudden changes. And maybe you saw that change coming, maybe you didn't, but all of a sudden everything starts to, and it just pushes you back on your heels. And all of our stories have, challenging opportunities. I specifically chose opportunities other than obstacles. Why? Because I'm trying to keep this as optimistic as possible. But when it comes to those moments in life, the unexpected twists, the sudden changes, the challenging opportunities, the question that I have to answer, the question you have to answer is, how am I going to respond? And here's my encouragement for all of us, is to have a posture, have a position to say, come on, let's go. Let's go. Are you ready? Now, in this series, Let's Go, we're going to be going through the book of Ruth. It's a story of a young woman named Ruth. It's a story about an older woman named Naomi. And it's a story about a man named Boaz. And to fully understand the story of Ruth, we have to go, to the book right before Ruth, and that's the book of Judges. And to understand the intensity and the darkness of the book of Judges, we have to go back to the very ending of the story of Joshua, which is also a book in the Bible. You see, Joshua was a leader that God handed the baton to lead his people into the promised land. And Joshua does this. In the very last chapter of the book of Joshua, Joshua's story, he only had a few pages left to be filled out. And he gives this impassioned sermon, this impassioned message to all of the Israelites. And he looks at all of them and says, hey, this is all you have to do. You got to fear God. You got to put God number one. Live in awe of God, of worship, of honor to God. You got to obey God and you got to serve him. That's all you have to do. In fact, guess what? For you and me, it's all we have to do. This is how to live our life. In this moment, Joshua says some of these famous words. He goes, as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. And then Joshua passes away, and we turn the page, and now we're in the book of Judges. Remember, all the people had to do was this, and guess what they chose not to do? Any of it. And that's why the story, the book of Judges, is such a dark, evil story. In fact, if you have young kids, parents, that's not a children's story at all. And tucked in the midst of this time period of the Judges, we get the story of Ruth. In this dark, evil time period, all of a sudden we see that there's a few people that actually feared God, obeyed God, and served God. In the story of Ruth, we see this amazing picture of healing and hope. And maybe for you, you're here today because you desperately need some healing and you're looking for hope. And my prayer is that you experience that. And you hold on to the hope that can guide you through any season of life. Now, there's one more insight when it comes to the story of Ruth that I just want to challenge you to keep focused in on. Years and years ago, I was in college and I had a professor that made these two statements that forever changed how I read the Bible. He said to us, he goes, the Old Testament is the New Testament concealed, and the New Testament is the Old Testament revealed. And I tell you, as I've studied and read the Bible, if I'm in the Old Testament, I'm looking for the New Testament that's concealed in that storyline because God is wiring through such a perfect storyline. And when I'm in the New Testament, right, I'm looking for the Old Testament revealed. So as we make our way through the story of Ruth, this is what I want you to also be, looking for. How is Jesus and the church concealed in the story of Ruth? And it's really important. That's both Jesus and the church. You see, we live in this TikTok, Instagram reel generation where people just post all of these videos. And I hear all the time people saying, well, I love Jesus and not the church. Oh, Jesus and I are really close, but I want nothing to do with the church. Oh, yeah, Jesus, man, I couldn't live without Jesus, but church, not for me. You can't love Jesus and not love his church. You can't love Jesus and not be part of his church. You can't. Why? Because what we're told in the Bible is the church is the bride of Christ, the bride of Jesus. It'd be me walking up to you saying, man, I love you, but your spouse, hate him, hate her. What would you do? I know what you do. You would just kind of, just a little tap. Not knock me out cold, right? But right, the same thing I would do if you walked up to me and like, hey, Chris, man, I love you, but your wife, I don't. You can't love Jesus and not love his church because Jesus came to die for everyone. And Jesus set in motion a group of imperfect and messy people. I'm imperfect, I'm messy. What about you? He set in motion a group of imperfect and messy people to tell other imperfect and messy people that there's one person who's perfect. And his grace and truth is sufficient for them. So as we make our way through the story of Ruth, look for Jesus, the church, concealed in the story, in this Old Testament story, titled Ruth. Well, let's step into the story. We're going to start at the very, very beginning, Ruth chapter 1, verse 1. And this is what we're told. This is how the story began. In the days when the judges ruled. Now, I told you, for us to understand the story of Ruth, we have to understand this time period of the judges. Now, when you hear the word judges, don't think about courtroom judges. Think about tribal chieftain warriors, judges. This is who the judges were. At the very end of the book of Judges, we're given the core idea of not just of the book Judges, but this entire time period of when the judges ruled. And this is what we're told. In those days, Israel had no king, and everyone did as they saw fit, meaning they didn't do what Joshua told them to do, to fear God, obey God, serve God. They did whatever they wanted, and this was an extremely dark and evil time period. Now, with that said, let me introduce to you something that's, not really that life-giving. I simply call it the tragedy counter. I know, super not encouraging. But here's what I want to do. As we make our way through this very beginning part of the story, I want you to grasp the intensity, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, of this story. Let's not overlook what these people's story truly entailed. And so we're going to have a little counter for us to grasp, again, the intensity connected to the tragedies that they experienced. So the first one is they're living during this time period of the judges. So let's put a 1 on there, right? Everyone was doing as they saw fit. And then the story goes on. And immediately we're told there was famine in the land, which is number 2. And we don't understand famine. We don't understand what it's like to lack food. What we understand in the western part of the world is, well, we walk up to our refrigerator, we open up the doors, it's filled with food, and we say to ourselves, there's nothing to eat. We open up our freezer filled with food, we say to ourselves, there's nothing to eat. We walk into our pantry filled with food, and we say to ourselves, there's nothing to eat, and then we get in our car and drive to Taco Bell because there's nothing to eat. What we understand is, over this last week, have you thrown away any food that was kept in a refrigerator that is there to keep food longer, that went bad in the refrigerator when you had nothing to eat? Sure. Have you ever looked in your pantry and saw canned food with dates on it? And for some of you, you're a date person. I'm not, but I'm married to someone. If the date is passed, that food gets thrown away. We don't understand famine. And they were living in a day and age where they were just struggling to survive, struggling just to find enough food to eat. And we're told that a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. They went to live. They moved. They moved from their home to a foreign place. Let's put one more up there. I don't know if you've ever moved before, but moving's difficult. It's filled with loss. Loss of friends. If you move away from family, loss of family, loss of school teachers and sports teams and dentists and doctors, right? You leave everyone to go to a new place. It's filled with a lot of loss, a lot of tragedy. And to understand the significance of their move, let's quickly look at this map. They were living in Bethlehem. Bethlehem is about 6 minutes south of Jerusalem. They're moving to Moab, which was on the southeastern side of the Dead Sea. And the path they would have had to take lasted about some 50 miles through mountainous, desert. It was such a difficult, arduous trip. And, oh, by the way, remember, they were living in the time of the judges, where everyone did as they saw fit. It was a dark, evil time period. So it would have been treacherous, filled with fear. So not only were they were moving to a foreign land through a very fearful journey. So let's just put one more up. And we're told that the man's name was Elimelech. I can't say that name. I've tried. I practiced it. Elimelech. That's it, if you say it fast. His wife's name was Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion, and they were Ephraimites from Bethlehem, Judah. And they went to Moab and lived there. Now we got to pause there, because it's really important for us to understand the decision they made to leave the promised land, where Joshua led them into, to go live in Moab. And there's 4 really important insights I just want to quickly give you so you understand the intensity of this decision. First of all, the Moabites came from a guy named Moab. Moab was the son of a guy named Lot. Lot was a brother of Abraham. So you have Abraham's brother Lot. Lot is dad to Moab. But here's where the story gets really intense and disgusting. You see, Lot decided to have sex with his daughter, and she became pregnant and had Moab. And so the Moabites, their entire family tree gets connected to incest. Oh, by the way, God over and over again had said to the Moabites, stop worshiping pagan gods. They wouldn't, and so God cursed them because they refused to stop worshiping pagan gods. One of those pagan gods was a god named Molech, and part of their worship to Molech included child sacrifice. And over again, we see the Moabites oppressing the Israelites. The famous story is found in the book of Numbers. It includes the king of Moab, Balak, a prophet named Balaam, and a talking donkey. And the choice was to move their family there. Out of anywhere they could go, that's where they chose to move. So let's just, Put number 5 there. Now, we're told, Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was with her 2 sons. Let's put one more up there. Her sons married Moabite women, the one named Orpah and the other named Ruth. And they had lived there about 10 years. I mean, they have deep planted roots now in Moab. But Mahlon and Chilion also died. And Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husbands. Let's put number 7 and number 8. Now, let's just pause there for a moment. What's your tragedy counter at? I mean, this isn't an exhaustive list, but I don't know. What number would you put there? As you think about the last 6 months, the last year, maybe the last couple years. You see, it's so easy for us as human beings when it comes to the tragedies in our life. We like to put each one in a nice little box, at least I do. I want to keep them all organized on the shelf. And I kind of say to myself, well, that's just that one, and that one's that one, and that one's that one. And they don't connect, they don't interact, they don't touch. And I can choose to pull one off the shelf and put one back on. But here's the reality to all of our tragedies. They all stack together. They're all interconnected together emotionally and physically, mentally, spiritually. All of our tragedies aren't in separate little boxes. They're all in one big pot. And they have such a significant impact to the twists of our stories, to the changes in our stories, to the challenging opportunities of our story. And we're told that when Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them, she and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from there. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living and set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. But this time, they're traveling back on the road, and now they don't have men, a husband, to protect them. They're women by themselves. Let's add just one more up on that tragedy count. This would just exponentially increase the terror, the fear, the difficulty of the journey. Then Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show you kindness." That Hebrew word is hesed, kindness, mercy, love. As you have shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband. Well, they kind of went back and forth, and all of a sudden we're told that at this they wept loud again as Naomi continues to try and encourage them to leave her. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. Let's add one more because now Naomi is dealing with loss of Orpah leaving her. Even though she encouraged them over and over and over again to leave, she now has to face that reality, that loss. But we're told Ruth clung to her. And Naomi looks at Ruth and says, "Look, your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her." But Ruth replied, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me." And when Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. We're going to pause in the story, and we'll pick up next week in part 2. But I want to go back to your story, your tragedy counter. Seriously. What's the number at right now? You see, we try to position the tragedies in our stories, the unexpected twists, the sudden changes, the challenging opportunities, and we try to just kind of minimize them, say it's not a big deal. I'm just going to get over it. Oh, sure, I will get through it. But when we actually stop and start to look back at the pages of our story and realize the number of tragedies that continue to stack up one after another, after another, after another, we realize how impacted we are. You see, I think about the story of Naomi and her husband and sons as they journeyed to Moab. You see, Elimelech, his name means my God is king. And I've thought about that a lot. His name literally means my God is king. And he moved his family. He ran from famine, which was bad, hear me, which was bad, to Moab, a horrendous place. Started with incest. They practiced child sacrifice. I mean, horrendous. Yeah, I understand famine was bad, but he chose to move his family to Moab. And I think for you and me, we make those decisions, don't we? Especially in seasons where our story is pretty dark and bleak. So let me ask you, what's your Moab? What's your Moab? Where have you ran from? What have you chosen to run from? And maybe that's not physically, maybe it is. Maybe you just keep moving from place to place to place. Why? Because you just think hope lies in that new place, and all of a sudden you've realized that you follow you wherever you go. So every new place you physically move to, you're still there. And you bring it all with you. What's your Moab? Where have you ran from? Maybe the dreams that were so bright in your world are now just completely snuffed out. And God's stirring within you. Go back. The dreams might look slightly different, but there's a dream, a massive dream that God wants you to look at. Maybe for you, you've been living in isolation. And you're going back is to say, I'm going to choose not to live in isolation. Maybe for you, you've been covering your pain with a hobby. Maybe you've been covering your pain. Maybe you've been running from it with an addiction. Maybe for you, I don't know, what's your Moab? So let me ask you, will you go? Will you return? Will you embrace the story that God desired for you to live out? The year was January 2016. My family and I, we had traveled from South Florida up to Mill Hall, Pennsylvania to spend the Christmas and New Year holidays with our family. It was a season that had been stacked with tragedy. In fact, it had been about a 4.5-year season stacked with tragedy. Multiple moves. After we had experienced 17 years of just stability, 4 different moves, 17 years of a great church that we got to be a part of, and all of a sudden we experienced, 2 churches that were just so unhealthy. We had some of our closest friends literally just walk away from us in a time where we needed them. It was 4.5 years of tragedy upon tragedy upon tragedy. In that season, I lost my dad, my best friend. And we found ourselves in Mill Hall, Pennsylvania, celebrating Christmas with our family. But Kim and I just knew that another season was going to come our way. As we got into the car after that January 2nd, 3rd, to drive back to the Philadelphia airport to fly back to South Florida, Kim and I got in the car, our girls were in the back seat, and we started having the conversation that we knew we were going to have. The conversation was, we're going to have to leave. I was an executive pastor at a church, and what I had uncovered and discovered, we could not morally, ethically, spiritually stay at that church. And so the entire 4-hour drive to the airport, Kim and I made such a horrific decision, but the wise decision to move yet again. As a dad, I felt like a failure. As a father and husband, I felt like a failure. As a leader, a pastor, I felt like a failure. I mean, just all of those words of failure and shame just wreaked havoc within me. And I knew this was the best decision. January 2016 was a very dark, dark season for me and my family. And unbeknownst to me, January of 2016 was a very difficult January for Tri-County Church. You see, the founding pastor, Dave, had just launched this new series titled Propel. In fact, he had recorded a message titled What Leaders Leave Behind. He recorded it early because he had a trail run that Saturday, and it was called the Frozen Snot, located in Lock Haven. And so they recorded it early just in case he was really tired after, an endurance race. And so he recorded the message, What Leaders Leave Behind. And that Saturday, he tragically passed away on the trail, leaving a family in pieces and a church family in a spot of saying, God, now what? I think about what this church went through in January of 2016 and the months after that. And I think about what me and my wife Kim and our family went through in January and the months following that. And you see, I'd never heard of Du Bois, Pennsylvania. I'd never heard of Tri-County Church. What I know is by June of 2016, my family packed up a Penske truck and we drove from South Florida to Mill Hall, Pennsylvania to have a season of just rest. I was going to just help serve my father-in-law, who is the lead pastor of the Mill Hall Church of Christ. And what Kim and I needed was healing. Healing from 4.5 years of just a whole lot of tragedy. And we were just holding on to hope. Hope. In that season, we walked into a church that just wrapped their arms around me and my family. In that season, we had family that just wrapped their arms around us. In that season, I regained the joy of just serving the church, walking beside my father-in-law, helping some other churches on the East Coast, and we're just trying to figure out what was next. But what we knew is we needed healing. What we knew is we were holding on to hope. What we didn't realize was there was a church in Clearfield County that needed healing, and they were holding on to hope. Several months later, all of a sudden we discovered Tri-County Church in Du Bois, Pennsylvania. We made our way over, and the first time we walked into the Du Bois campus, we were captivated because something was happening. Over the next following months, we engaged in this conversation. And now 9 years later, we have experienced so much healing personally and walked with a church that needed so much healing. And every step along the way, holding on to hope, because the church is the hope of the world. And that's why I think about my story. I think about Dave's story. Someone I never met, but I think if I would have met him, we would have been the best friends. You see, this journey we're on, Let's Go, is also a journey where we're just celebrating 30 years as a church. 30 years that God has done and continues to do such amazing things to reach people, change lives, and impact local communities. And I think about my story, and I think about this church's story, that God, in a season of tragedy, brought so much healing and hope. And God wants that for your story as well. And so my encouragement for you is have a posture to lean in and embrace the let's go. There's more people that need to know who Jesus is and the healing and the hope that only Jesus can bring. There's more people that need a church that says to all people, just come on. We're all messy. We're all imperfect. Let's go. Our communities and beyond need more churches that have a bright light that says, come on, let's go. Together, we can experience the healing that only Jesus can bring. And together, we can hold on to the hope in the midst of our dark world that illuminates every corner. Let's go. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, I just ask that no matter what every single person is experiencing right now in their life and their story, that they realize that you are a God that scripts the pages. And we just have to have a posture to say, come on, God, I'm with you. I'm going to fear you. I'm going to obey you. I'm going to serve you. Hey, God, I'm ready to go. I'm thankful for a church for 30 years that's had the posture as a church for all people, a church for healing, a church for hope. Lord, may we continue for another 30 years to be a church just like that. In your name I pray. Amen.